Games can make or break your youth ministry, but most youth leaders are never taught what role they're actually supposed to play. How do you keep things fun without sacrificing depth? How do you build something meaningful without losing attention? Today's conversation is with Zach Hartman, the founder of ActuallyFun. He has a combined 15 years of youth ministry experience, leading groups of students from 6 all the way up to 50. He's dedicated the last 3 years of his life to equipping youth leaders with resources they need to build engaging, Christ-centered community. So Zach, let me ask you this. What's something you believe is important to youth ministry that most leaders tend to avoid or miss?
Okay, thank you for having me. I'm very excited for this first episode here. I would say that most leaders struggle in either one of two ways, right? So they either have their time together is all lesson, which makes it difficult to keep your group's attention, or they go the entire opposite route where it's all games, which makes it hard to build something meaningful. And so I think that the key to successful youth ministry is using games to teach your lessons. Because experiential learning is by far the most effective way to get your teaching to stick, and when it's done well, the games will bring people in, while the lesson is what keeps them coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we say when we're engaging people in youth ministry is we talk about these new people that come into our youth groups. What role should a game play to a new person in their first experience walking into your youth group?
Oh, of course. I love games because it gives you a glimpse behind the scenes of who someone really is, right? Because games help build bridges between people. They allow you to let your guard down. They have shared experiences that they can build. And in an environment that you don't normally get to experience, you get to be a little silly, right? And so I think that the games are what convince students to come in the first place, because no one wants to come somewhere where they're just being talked at for an hour. And at the very least, if you can promise them, hey, we're going to have fun while we're here, that's going to convince people that are maybe on the fence. And what you'll find is that the lesson portion of it and the community that you're establishing and that you're allowing these new people to be brought into, that's what keeps them coming back.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do we balance games not taking over the entirety of our time, though, and still building strong biblical truth into our youth programming? How do you balance that?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly the right question to be asking, right? Because some groups will just do nothing but games, and then they'll get a ton of people will come out, but then inevitably what ends up happening is they don't form any sort of meaningful, deep relationships. And so this next generation is hungry for that Christ-centered community that they're just not getting in school or oftentimes in their families. And so what we like to do with my youth group and the entire purpose of ActuallyFun is to build engaging games where their experience will reflect the lesson that we're talking about. And so an example of that is a game that we like to play called Pan Bang. And I always use this example because it's very fun to play, and I was always the worst offender of the lesson that you learn from this game. But you basically, the idea is a leader has a pan and a wooden spoon, and they'll hit the pan a certain number of times, say 5, and you have to try to get into a group with 5 people. And so what inevitably ends up happening is people run around and they're grabbing each other and they're grabbing their friends, but they're missing someone, so they'll grab someone out of another group, or they'll have 6 and they'll be pushing someone away, and what happens is someone gets eliminated. The game goes on and you eliminate more and more people, and it's just a fun, crazy, kind of cutthroat game. Like I said, I was the one who would have been the first one to push anyone else out when I was in youth group. But what is nice about that is that after that game is over, you can use that as a way of teaching a lesson. So you can say that, hey, the world is very quick to tell us that we should look out for ourselves and to just be on the lookout for pushing other people away and building ourselves up at any cost. But when you get to ask questions like, what did it feel like when you were excluded from a group? Or what made you want to rip someone else away just for the sake of winning? You get to have a conversation about, hey, our group isn't going to be the same way as the world would have you believe is the best way to live. We're going to look for opportunities to invite each other in and to build each other up. And when you establish your group as different, people are actually drawn to that kind of language. People are tired of the shallow, just a quick hit, attention grabbing society that we've grown up in. And you get to show like there's some real depth here. And so I love games like that. It makes the message stick. People will remember the game that they played. Even if they don't remember the exact words of the lesson, it'll still resonate with people a lot more.
Yeah, Christian community is so important, especially for our young people. When you are planning your event, when you're planning your youth night, how do you do that? Are you planning the game first and then your lesson follows? follows, or are you planning your lesson out and then letting the game follow that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll repeat a principle that my dad taught me. He's been in youth ministry for over 40 years now, and this blew my mind the first time I ever heard it. You start with the lesson first, and then pick the game that reflects and mirrors those principles you're talking about. Because for far too long, I tried to pick a bunch of games and then force a lesson out of it, and that just wasn't as natural. And the advantage of starting with the lesson first is you know the direction that the conversation is going to go, and you can even slightly tweak some of the rules of the game to better fit the exact scenario that you're hoping plays out. You can, in the moment while you're interacting with the youth that are playing the game, you can kind of play puppet master a little bit and steer the game in the right direction. But that principle of starting with the lesson first and then picking the game that comes out of that is definitely the way to go. And that principle extends not just to the game that you're playing, but if you're going to utilize something like a movie clip or a YouTube video in your lesson, or any sort of little activities or just visualizations of what you're talking about, it helps to have that. And so what I like to do is I'll have the 3 main bullet points that I want to hit in a lesson. And then that's kind of what I build my lesson based off of, and just kind of think to myself, like, what situation can I put my group into that's going to allow them to start thinking about those kind of things?
Yeah, that's awesome. What is one small change that you have made in your youth ministry that's having a positive impact that everybody else needs to know about, that everybody else should be doing too?
Oh man, well, this goes right off of what I was just saying. So I am not a planner. I am someone that it's a blessing and a curse, because I can be spontaneous and I can come up with something on the fly, but you benefit greatly from planning stuff out in advance. And so when I started planning my entire youth group calendar, all in the beginning of the year before I had any of the meetings, that helped tremendously, because I wasn't planning every meeting word for word as in I'm exactly going to hit all these bullet points, but I just came up with, okay, this is the meeting we're going to have this week, and we're going to come up with those 3 main bullet points and the game that I want to tie that into. And I was able to do that for the entire youth group year. Much more work up front, but much less work in the long term. But what ended up happening was, now I didn't find myself getting halfway through a year realizing, oh man, I already kind of talked about this lesson earlier in the year. I wish I would have saved that thought for now, or just sort of getting to the point where it's like, I don't even know what this next lesson is going to be like. It was much less winging it, and it gave a full cohesive theme to the entire year. And again, that just helped the message stick significantly better. And so I think being able to plan that youth group year in advance is very helpful, and it's well worth the extra effort that goes into it early on.
That's awesome. How do you plan for unprecedented events in our world? Like things that just happen that need to be addressed, especially by the church, whether it's a holiday maybe that's coming up that you're maybe planning for, or just something that happens that needs to be discussed. How do you plan for those things, and are you able to adjust that year-long schedule that you're talking about?
Yeah, and I think that's a principle that I picked up recently from a mentor, and he had shared with me that you got to have your plan, but in ministry you have to be willing to hold it loosely, because things come up, things change. Sometimes you can plan ahead for it, like a holiday or something, but sometimes it's something local or something national that you want to address, or maybe it's even something just within your own group. Man, the number of times that I've led a meeting and I'm basically just talking to one person, even though it's under the guise of this is a whole group-wide meeting, is astounding to me, how often I've had to do that. And so I think that this is the perfect balance, that kind of like 3 bullet points, like major ideas, because now you've got the framework and the guidance that it's very easy for you to just plug that in and adjust it weekly as you are approaching the actual date of your meeting. But at the same time, you haven't committed so much effort to a meeting that you're unable to pivot and you're so tied into something. And so I think that really helps you be more flexible throughout the year, as well as, as you're developing, hey, I want to talk about this kind of topic, that'd be a good topic for Easter. And so you can plug those in rather than, oh man, it's the middle of March and I need a meeting for Easter, and I kind of already talked about this theme before. So yeah, I think that's a good middle ground.
Awesome. In light of your previous answers and everything we've been talking about today with Christian community and games and all this fun stuff, what is one Bible verse that you'd want to share with our audience to tie us all together and encourage us?
Oh man, I love it. So I will share the Bible verse that my personal youth group has decided is going to be our theme verse. And so this comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 4, verses 9 to 12. It says that 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And I love especially the last line there, right? Because I think that's the real value that youth group offers. It's not just a place where you can be silly and crazy, which it is. And it's not just a place where you can get a nice snack, which it can be. What the real value is again, that Christ-centered community. It's building meaningful relationships that young people are so desperate for. And that Christ-centered is such a key component of it, because if you try to grow towards, a specific person or something that's of the world, what ends up happening is your goalpost always continues to shift. Whereas if you and another person, think of it as you guys on the base of a triangle and God being at the top, if you guys are trying to both grow closer to God, you'll grow closer to each other. And so that 3-strand cord, it's you and it's your community, and God being interwoven into all of that allows you guys to grow and strengthen in your faith and thrive in your life. And so I just love that verse. I love that simple idea of we're better together. They always say if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together.
Amen. All right, last thing here. Is there any ministry or organization you want to give a shout out to close out our time together and to share with our audience what's going on?
Of course. Well, I got to shout out Actually Fun, because we have been working for 3 years now, and our entire vision is to see every young person and their family thrive in their faith through Christ-centered community. And so our mission, in light of that vision, is to be the ones that are able to develop those resources for youth leaders so that they can grow those Christ-centered communities in their churches. And so we've worked nonstop for the last 3 years, developing resources from our game index that has over 100 free game tutorials at this point. They're two-minute videos on YouTube. You can even sort by those on our website. We've got curriculum that is exactly what we're talking about. It is a fun game to play, and then it is the lesson that game ties into, and all of the guiding questions you need. That's our game-driven lesson series. And we even just launched our most powerful ministry planning tool yet, called Cross-Reference. So you can click on any verse in the entire Bible, and it shows you YouTube videos, movie clips, songs, articles, and other resources that are helpful for teaching about that topic. So that's literally going to change the way that you do ministry. And we're honestly just always working to create that next big thing. So ActuallyFun.com, we've got everything that it'll need to take your youth ministry to the next level.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Zach, for your commitment to this and to helping youth ministers everywhere, creating Christ-like community. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you so much, Kay. Appreciate it.